What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does a day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them, and you, deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. Hey guys, this is an amazing episode that's a follow-up to many years ago when I first started the podcast and I interviewed Nichelle Sublett, who was Mrs. North Carolina in 2018. She's also a TEDx speaker and she's founder of the Start Asking Fertility. And the reason she's back on the podcast is since we had spoken about her fertility journeys, they were so brutal. And hopefully you guys listened to it in the previous episode. But since then, she has taken something that was so painful and she turned it into her power. And she not only started a huge movement with hashtag Start Asking, but she's now started the Start Asking Fertility Coaching. And she walks individuals and couples through their fertility journeys in a minimum of an 8-week series. And in this episode, we are learning all about what fertility coaching is, why she started this company, how needed it is, and what that 8-week minimum journey looks like. So if you know someone who has been open or transparent with you about a fertility journey, be it male factor, female factor, unknown factor, multiple miscarriages, please share this episode with them. They need to know about Start Asking Fertility, which is more information on the website, startaskingfertility.com. And I would really like for you and for your family member or for your friend who is struggling with infertility to hear directly from Nichelle Sublett today. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Welcome. Before we get started with this episode, I just wanted to share a little bit about an adventure that I have on Instagram. My Instagram handle is birth.story.academy, and I have been doing something in stories called Birthbound. Birthbound is where I tell birth stories in real time as I, the doula, leave for a birth. And then I update the audience as the birth unfolds. So if you love birth stories, then I would invite you to join me on Instagram at birth.story.academy and watch my stories for Birthbounds. After 23 years of doing birth work as a doula, I have less than a 10% cesarean section rate. That is an 87% relative risk reduction of having a cesarean section if you were in my care. And the question then becomes why? While I've been to the operating room many times, I've only been to the operating room 3 times if a client was in spontaneous labor and did not have any medical interventions. 3 out of 1,300. I've also only seen shoulder dystocia 2 times. 2 out of 1,300. And while my clients are not fully protected from having cesarean sections, medical interventions, and birth trauma even, the vast majority of those who go through Birth Story Academy in my program end up with positive, happy, non-traumatic births where they and their partners feel really empowered throughout the process. So in Birth Story Academy, you will learn about hospital policies and procedures, pelvic mechanics, the stages of labor, interventions, pain management options, how you can advocate for yourself, how your partner can advocate for you. It is 6 hours of information, and it also comes with the Birth Story Pregnancy Guidebook and Journal. You can go to birthstory.com and use code LOVE to receive $50 off. I would love to see you in class, have you part of my community, and start working towards a positive, informed, educated birth experience. And if you're just here for birth stories, that's okay too. Thanks for being here. Hey, Nichelle, welcome back to the Birth Story podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing so great, and I am really excited to catch up with you all these years later and how you already took us on this beautiful story of, well, it was a tearjerker, but this beautiful story of how your family came to be and your fertility journey. And at the time, you were working for a pharmaceutical company, and your platform was like the hashtag Start Asking when you were part of Mrs. North Carolina in 2018. And so It's 2025. I can't believe it's been so many years. And today we are talking about your company, which is now Start Asking Fertility, which is a coaching company. So yay. All right. You are the very first fertility coach that I've ever heard of. I certainly haven't interviewed anyone on the podcast. I'd venture to say many of the listeners are hearing about fertility coaching for the very first time today. So I want to start there. Just tell us, what is fertility coaching?
Yeah. So fertility coaching provides really a holistic approach and a practical approach to individuals and couples who are facing infertility. So it can be someone who has never engaged in the whole fertility treatment process. Maybe they don't have a fertility doctor yet, they're just starting out, but they've been trying for some time and they're unable to get pregnant. And so, where a fertility coach comes in is to help with that overwhelm, the stress, the uncertainty of it all by providing personalized strategies, building resilience, and supporting emotional growth. So, my goal as a fertility coach is to help people thrive, not just survive through this time in which they're encountering a unique path to parenthood.
I'm so glad that you used the word thrive because, as you know, I have been a doula for 22 years here in Charlotte, and many, I'd say 50% of my clients are or have conceived through a fertility journey. And when they come to me, they are often broken. They are hiring a doula because they just can't bear the thought of the pregnancy and the labor and the birth also being something that they would identify as like another traumatic experience. And they're very scared of loss. They've worked really hard. And so that brings us back to your own personal story and journey, which was being underdiagnosed for a very long time. And I know that's where the hashtag Start Asking comes from. But how did this evolve over the last couple of years since we talked last, from a platform with a hashtag to a company?
Yeah, so that's a great question. When I became Mrs. North Carolina, I knew immediately that I wanted to get this message out because at the time I had not revealed my infertility status to anyone. No one knew. Well, some friends and some family knew, but in general, a lot of people did not know what my husband and I were going through at the time. And at that point, it had been a good 4 or 5 years that we were engaged in various fertility treatments. I had already suffered 5 miscarriages when I became Mrs. North Carolina. So it was really important for me to put a face and a voice to the disease, especially as a woman of color, because at the time there weren't enough images and representation in the media of Black women who were suffering through infertility. So in the process of that year and making infertility awareness my platform, I ran across someone who asked me to do a TED talk, a TEDx talk in Chapel Hill. And at the time, I had started this hashtag Start Asking campaign, which was really to get women thinking about their fertility at an earlier age. So in their 20s or 30s, well, mainly 20s, I guess, asking their doctors for fertility assessments, because a lot of people don't know you can have an assessment done that looks at your uterus, that looks at your AMH, which is the reserve, like your egg reserve. How many eggs do you have left? There's no egg quality test, but a doctor can assess whether you might have endometriosis or a disease like PCOS, which is what I was diagnosed with at the age of 30, was polycystic ovary syndrome. And that disease is where, well, the hallmark symptom is that you're not ovulating. So I was getting a period every month and didn't know I wasn't ovulating. So using ovulation tests and trying to track my cycle was useless. So the point of the hashtag Start Asking movement was to say, look, we're getting looked at, we're getting our hearts looked at, we are getting assessed for so many other parts of the body. Why are we not having regular checkups for our fertility health? It's really just that simple to go in and ask your OBGYN or GYN to do some testing and see where you are. And I think people should do it long before they're ready to start having kids, so they establish a baseline and they can be educated on what they can do next, if there is some sort of potential barrier.
And so when you were invited to Chapel Hill to talk on this TEDx as a speaker, like, how did you feel about that, or how did you prepare for that talk?
Well, it took months of preparation. I worked with someone, a business coach, who helped me help me kind of come up with the concept and get it on paper. I wrote out a speech. I practiced many times. It was exciting and terrifying all at the same time, because I've seen tons of TED Talks and TEDx talks and never thought I would be on that stage. So it was really exhilarating. It's one of my greatest accomplishments.
I was going to say, I've listened to a lot of TEDx talks and they're very polished. So I was assuming there was a lot of work that went into getting that message right, because this message of hashtag Start Asking is something that you want to get right when you have that captive audience.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
tell me, on the podcast, I have interviewed a couple of companies that do like early fertility testing. And so I was wondering, like, if you could walk me through. I am somebody who's maybe been trying to get pregnant. Let's say I'm in a male female relationship, I'm married. Let's just go with that as a case study.
Hmm.
And my partner and I have been trying for 6 to 12 months and we haven't gotten pregnant. At this point, is it like where I would involve a fertility coach? Or, like, really, at what stage do you think that your company fits into the infertility process?
So I believe that it depends on the person. The recommendation right now is if you are under the age of 35 and you've been trying for 12 months, then you should see a fertility doctor. If you are over the age of 35 and you've been trying for 6 months, you should see a fertility doctor. So that's the current guideline and recommendation. However, as far as involving a fertility coach, I think that can happen whenever someone personally feels they are getting overwhelmed, they're getting too stressed, they don't know what to do next. Someone may not know how to find a fertility doctor, what questions to ask, what should I even be looking for as far as statistics of the clinic. Someone may not know what other holistic types of things they can add on to help boost their fertility. There's tons of stuff on the internet, of course. We call it, quote, Dr. Google,
Yeah.
which I feel like just stresses people out more. And that's where I come in to streamline this entire process. I can pick out the nuggets that are really needed, um, let someone know based on my personal expertise and my personal experience, I can save someone a lot of time, basically, and a lot of heartache by, being that go-to. Um, and so I think it's an individual decision as far as when you want to add on some help. Basically, think of me as your fertility friend. I'm in your pocket. I can be accessed. Typically, I set up 8-week sessions with my clients, so we would meet weekly, either in person or on Zoom. But they're able to access me during the week, in between sessions as well.
Yeah.
So it's a fluid relationship in that sense. And yeah, I guess it depends on the person as far as when they feel like they need that.
Yeah. Well, as you were
Mhm.
talking, I was thinking about some people go into their desire for parenthood knowing that there is a component of infertility. And I was thinking about like a solo parent by choice that might, want to hire Start Asking Fertility sooner because they know they're going on a fertility journey, or a
Right.
queer couple that, you know, I joke, everyone's azospermatic in the
Yeah.
relationship, right? And this is
Yeah.
known quote or air quote, right? Infertility. And
Mhm.
then there are other relationships where maybe you are partnered, but it's known infertility because you lost an ovary when you were younger, or someone had an orchiectomy. There's all these different things, and maybe they'd have frozen their sperm before they went on for their testicular cancer, or, I've heard every story under the sun, I think, as a doula. And so, yes, that makes sense. And then we find these couples that they go into this journey and they're so optimistic and super excited. And then their period comes. And then they're so excited and they're optimistic and their period comes. And 12 months, if you're under 35,
Mhm.
Nichelle, that feels like a really, really long time. My journey was
Yes.
10 months, and that was brutal.
Yes. I mean, it feels so long. It feels so long. It was too long that I couldn't wait. I was 30 when we started trying, and I waited 6 months, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I've got to see a doctor. I mean, and that's kind of my personality as well. Just very, I know what I want and when I want it. And this was the vision that I had. And when month after month came, as you described, I'm puzzled because at the time I'm healthy, my husband's healthy. What's going on? This is supposed to be natural and simple and something that everyone who was born with ovaries can accomplish. So, I'm it it does smack you in the face when it doesn't come as easily or quickly as you thought. So,
Yeah.
I honestly, that's why I created Start Asking Fertility, is to be the person that I needed when I was going through my own fertility journey.
So you said a term about
Mhm.
a fertility doctor.
Mhm.
And I mean, I know the answer to this because I'm a doula, but let's imagine that everyone listening doesn't know what a fertility doctor is. Is that different from an OBGYN or a midwife?
Yes. So, a fertility doctor or a reproductive endocrinologist, an RE, specializes in helping couples or individuals conceive. So I went to my OB first because I had a long time established relationship with her. And she was able to treat me in the beginning. So she ran some tests, diagnosed me with PCOS, and then put me on Clomid.
Mm-hmm.
In the second month, I got pregnant and we were all excited, thinking, great, this was the answer. This wasn't so bad. It was only 2 months. And suffered a miscarriage at 8 weeks with that baby. So after that miscarriage, she referred me on to a fertility clinic.
Okay.
And that's when I was able to see the reproductive endocrinologist, who's able to do so much more than your gynecologist or OB.
Mm-hmm. Now, something is coming forward for me because you earlier already said when I think what you said was when I was 30 and we started trying and like it was several months in and you were like, and I thought, I'm a person with ovaries. This should be natural and simple. So already what I heard was you immediately blamed yourself. You immediately thought it had to be you. And
Yes.
so it's very important that we teach the listeners about the breakdown of infertility. So, because I just wish we didn't always blame ourselves. So, could you talk a
Mhm.
little bit about the statistics of when we get to the reproductive endocrinologist, what that looks like as far as like where infertility may be coming from?
Sure, because this was very eye-opening for me when I got with my fertility clinic, but it's basically a third, a third, a third. So a third of cases are male factor infertility, a third are female factor infertility, and a third is unknown. And that is the true breakdown, even though in our society, and I was guilty of this as well, of just assuming that the woman is always the issue, that the female is always the issue. That's really not the case. And unfortunately, there's just a lot of stereotypes out there that make us believe that.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you for sharing about that because it's something, especially like the climate that we're in right now, it's just so important that we're elevating women, we're elevating Black women, especially, and we're saying things out loud like, this isn't necessarily my fault. My
right.
body isn't doing anything wrong. Even the male partner's body isn't doing anything wrong. That it could be something that we can diagnose or test for on the male side or the female side, or we do all the tests in the world and there's no definitive answer. It just isn't happening. So,
Right.
so
Right.
I know like your story is just heartbreaking because you just mentioned your one miscarriage, but you would go on to have four more
Or more. Mhm.
miscarriages and years of infertility. And
Yes.
so you do know firsthand what this is like to be on a very, very long journey and what that can do to you as an individual, to your family, to your relationship. So, would you share with us a little bit about what this 8-week journey looks like with you and your company at Start Asking Fertility? So, if someone's early in their journey, like I said, a queer couple or solo by choice, or there's a known infertility and they hire you right away, or
Hmm.
they're 2 years into their journey and they're exhausted and they're fighting and they're feeling like this is never going to happen. But I know you said you start with a minimum of 8 weeks. And I'd love to
Hmm.
hear about what each of those sessions digs into.
So the first thing someone would do, a potential client, is go to my website, which is startaskingfertility.com. And all my social media is under Start Asking Fertility. So YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. You can find me on a number of platforms where I give tips and advice on what to do when you're in the middle of a fertility journey. So that would be the first step. We'd get on a phone call. I would send you an assessment. You would fill that out. We talk about, all your answers where I'm assessing your mental, social and emotional and physical aspects of what you've been through so far. And then we would get started with our week to week calls. So we'd have 8 weeks of calls. And week one is really getting to know you and getting to know what you've done already on your fertility journey. So I'm understanding your personal fertility history. We will set goals. I assess your emotional well being and lifestyle. And I give a little bit of homework each week. So that first week is more about journaling. The client would journal about their experiences, thoughts, and feelings related to what he or she has already been through in the fertility process.
I was going to say, I'm glad you said he or she, because at this point, if they're coupled, are you working with both couple, like the couple together, or is it just like one on one with male factor infertility or female factor infertility, or are you working with both of them together?
So if it's a couple who wants to work both together, I'm happy to do that. And yeah, I will work with a couple, both of them together. If they would rather, because I've actually had husbands reach out about their wives, and then I solely worked with the wife.
Okay.
So it depends on how they want to do it.
Yeah. And I was wondering, it depends if they've gotten a diagnosis yet too, right? Like if it's male factor, female factor, or unknown factor.
Yes, that definitely can change the pathway of how I'm going to approach the coaching. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Especially with homework.
Yes, no, that's true.
Yeah.
Good point. So if it was a couple, maybe they journal, how things are going together and individually.
Okay.
So depending, yeah.
Okay.
But good question. Week two, I will focus on the mind and body connection concerning fertility. So looking at the impact of stress, emotions, and mindset. Some of the homework is, practicing daily mindfulness techniques. I give relaxation exercises. And this week is really focused on reducing stress, which is a big one. But I also, of course, give my personal things that helped me in my process with reducing stress. So, for instance, at some point I stopped going to baby showers. So, we talk that out and figure out like what strategy is really going to help as far as reducing discomfort and also feeling isolated, because that's a big one as well. So we work on that in that week as well.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned like the boundary of you stopped going to baby showers, because sometimes we have these obvious triggers. And I think it's really important, of all things of life, to cut out those obvious triggers. I remember somebody, maybe it was my therapist or something, telling me a long time ago after I had given birth and I was really having some negative body image stuff. And she was like, yeah, it was my therapist. She was like, if you're going to stay on social media, then I want you to just start following accounts of people who look like you and stop following accounts of people that don't look like you. And anytime someone would come up in my feed that was like a size 4 modeling a bikini, they were out. But if they were a size 12 trying on clothes from Amazon, they were in,
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So even tweaking your, the algorithm does a really good job of tweaking things for you. So I would say I don't know if this is part of your strategy, but, devouring more content that serves you and less content that doesn't serve you. And ultimately the algorithm will catch up to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. I think social media is a big piece of mindset and stress for people in a variety of ways. I remember having to unfollow everyone at some point who had a child or had a baby. I just I couldn't take it anymore. It was too much. Seeing the first day of school posts, seeing the Christmas and Easter baskets, and I'm like, why am I torturing myself? This makes no sense. But
Mm-hmm.
it took me a while to get there when I was on my own journey. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, these are things that I definitely share with my clients. So now looking at week 3, that's nutrition and fertility. So we look at how food choices can affect fertility. So this is more of a holistic part. Um, we create a fertility friendly meal plan. I also discuss common fertility myths and the impact of diet on them. I'll never forget hearing that you should, eat the inside of the pineapple, the bromelain.
I
And,
didn't know
there's
that.
research out there. Did you hear that one?
No, I was like, I haven't heard that one.
Okay. So that one, there's an enzyme in the bromelain that's supposed to help with when you have an embryo transfer. Like, it's supposed to help the baby stick, the embryo stick inside the
Okay.
uterus. And there is some research to back that up. But at the same time, there's this whole thing on social media. I don't know if you've seen it, but eating McDonald's French fries after a transfer, and that there is absolutely nothing to back that up. That's just, that's a myth. That's just something people do. Oh, the fries help me. The fries are going to help the embryo stick. I've heard that. And
Stop
it's,
it now. You guys, please do not eat McDonald's French fries ever for any reason,
I know. Are they even
including
fries and are they even
fertility.
made out of potatoes?
No, I'm sure it's not real food at all. This is not part of your holistic approach. So, but
No.
Nichelle, I wanted to ask you something on nutrition for this week then. Okay.
Sure.
So, because I used to be a drug rep also, I don't know if we talked about that. I worked for
No.
AstraZeneca for,
I don't know if we talked about that.
yeah, I worked for AstraZeneca for 17 years. And I called on I called on a lot of Nigerian physicians, actually. There's a large
Mhm.
population of Nigerian physicians in Charlotte. And
True.
I'm going to talk about him because you wouldn't mind me using his name, but Dr. Kenny Takumba. And
Okay.
he was a primary care physician who was a twin from Nigeria. And
Mhm.
when he found out I was a doula, because I was also a doula at the same time, he told me, and I've looked since researched this, and it is completely true. The
Mhm.
highest population of multiples in the world is Nigeria.
Really?
And yes, and they believe it is linked to this very specific, it's like a hot pink orange sweet potato, different than the sweet potatoes that are grown in the United States. And
Mhm.
it's known to be very high in progesterone, which helps with ovulation and hyperovulation. And so
Hmm.
in the Nigerian naming ceremonies, there's actually like the firstborn and the secondborn of the multiples. So I don't remember the name, but if you had,
Mhm.
um, it started with a K because he went by Kenny. But if you
Okay.
were the K name, that was,
Cassava? Or no, is that something else?
I wouldn't remember because it's been so many years since we had this conversation.
Okay.
But it always just stuck with me. And so I went home and I researched it, and it was absolutely true that there are these sweet potatoes in Nigeria, and I would say like the northwestern coast of Africa, and that are high in progesterone. And now, so
Hmm.
all that to be said, you guys, it is very much proven that there are certain foods, not McDonald's French fries,
No.
that do aid in fertility, both male and female.
Yes, I found that very interesting. And in addition, I do partner with different people. Like, I have an acupuncturist, I partner with a nutritionist. So I'm able to stay on top of the latest research as far as, yes, fertility rich foods. Um,
Amazing. That's your pharmaceutical background, clinical trials.
yes, exactly. You know all about that.
Yes, so do you. I'm loving this. We're only on like week 3, and I'm like, okay.
Yes.
I was like, this is all tracking. Okay.
Okay. So week 4 is when we dive into exercise, movement, and fertility. So really looking at the impact of physical activity on fertility. And, there's benefits to exercise, but you don't want to over exercise or under exercise. So we basically develop, or I will develop a balanced exercise plan for the client.
Yeah.
Um, I know when I was going through infertility, I did a lot of fertility yoga, which was amazing. And, well, I guess this isn't really a physical activity, but meditation along with the yoga as well. So we can't underestimate physical movement and how that impacts mindset.
In my own doula practice here, because
Mhm.
I run a pregnancy concierge, and in the pregnancy concierge we literally do breath work and
Mm.
prenatal yoga and postnatal yoga as part of the program. So when you
Ooh.
hire a doula on my team and part of my collaborative in the
Mhm.
concierge, it comes with a bunch of things like childbirth education, but breath work and prenatal yoga are
Mm.
so important to just the health of the pregnancy and the health of the person who's giving birth or is pregnant and the baby. So I
I love that.
absolutely can. It doesn't just start with pregnancy, is kind of what I'm saying, is that these
Mhm.
are tools for fertility, but also tools for pregnancy and life.
Yes, I was going to say life in general, right?
Mhm.
It's wow. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, breath work is amazing. Love that. Okay, so week 5, we focus on hormone health. So, understanding and balancing hormones for fertility. And some of the key hormones are estrogen and progesterone. But I also help clients learn how to track their cycles and understand their fertility windows. Certain people don't have a typical fertile window because they may have PCOS or some other type of hormonal imbalance. So, for people who do have that typical fertile window, I'll teach them how to track their cycle using ovulation apps or temperature charting.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Are you able to have your client sign a form, like a consent form, for you to work with their reproductive endocrinologist directly to kind of share information? How does that work? I was thinking it could be a really neat collaborative relationship versus the client's relationship with you and then the client's relationship with the reproductive endocrinologist or the fertility clinic.
Yes, there actually is a waiver that can be signed, and or I guess you would call it a consent form that, like a HIPAA form, essentially,
Yeah, where you
where I
could.
can,
Yeah,
yes,
sorry.
yes, that is
Let
an
me.
option for people who want that. Yes, which I highly encourage.
Yeah, I was thinking like that would be really helpful, especially when you were talking about fertility windows and stuff, because I know a lot of that has to do with going and getting blood work done. So I
Yes,
would really
exactly.
want a note from the doctor that was like, here are the results of the blood work. And then you could consult on that.
Exactly. Right. I need to have the facts. So, yeah, that's a good question.
Hmm.
Yeah, I like working in tandem with the reproductive endocrinologists. Of course, they're doing everything medical. I'm really a support with the social emotional piece and also holistic piece of it all. So,
So,
um,
so a couple more weeks left
oh yes, okay. So, a
on
couple
the
more weeks. So,
journey. I was just thinking, so that you said 8 weeks instead of 8 sessions. So this really is weekly.
yeah, I'm sorry. So it's 8 weeks, but 8 weekly sessions,
Okay.
and then the work is done in between by the client. So the
Okay.
homework,
Okay.
essentially.
Okay. And
Yes.
then at the end, I'm going to ask you, or I can ask you now. So what happens if they get pregnant in the middle of their 8 weeks?
Ah, this is a good question. You know what? This has not happened yet.
Okay.
But great question. If they get pregnant in the middle, then I'm happy to continue to support their journey. or they can end their journey with me. It depends. I would encourage someone to continue though, because at least for me, the first trimester when I was finally pregnant with my son was absolutely terrifying. I needed someone to help me manage my emotions and feelings surrounding each doctor's visit and the heartbeat checks. I just had so much almost PTSD from continuously being told we no longer hear a heartbeat. So, at least for me, each appointment was very difficult.
Mm-hmm. I'm going
Yeah.
to come back to that thought at the very end of this podcast, you guys, because I want that exact emotion and validation when someone does get pregnant after a long fertility or even a short fertility journey, but a fertility journey. I want to talk about how that plays a role in quality of care in your pregnancy, labor, and birth. So we're going to come back to that after we finish going through the rest of the weeks. I just was thinking, oh my gosh, what if this is awesome? And you're like working with Nichelle and then you get pregnant.
I know that would be wonderful. I would love that. And I should throw in so each plan is customized, but this is, I will say, a general plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's obviously geared toward the female in the relationship, or if it's a single woman, because all of this is more female related. I'm just giving an example of a general what the 8 weeks look like in general, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think that like at least me listening to this conversation as I'm interviewing you, I think it's really apparent that it is customizable because, no two stories are the same and no two journeys are the same. So, but I do appreciate this. I think this is helpful, like a generic outline. So,
Yes.
yeah. So
Yes.
after kind of consulting with hormones,
Yes.
then what's the next week?
So week 6 is about exploring treatment options. And again, customizable because some people may already have started treatment options, but we talk about assisted reproductive technology. So I'm doing a lot of education on like common fertility issues like PCOS, endometriosis, male infertility. We go through holistic approaches and treatment options that are medical, Western medical options, and discuss coping strategies when faced with setbacks. So some of the homework this week, that week 6, would be researching different treatment options or support groups because certain people, at least for me, I benefited greatly from a support group as well. I also had a psychologist. I would have also had a fertility coach if that had been a thing back then, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't. So I had like a wraparound. I also had an acupuncturist. I was really getting a wraparound of services because when you're 4, 5, 6 years in, going it alone is not helpful. So I say all this to say that that's what week 6 is about. And I'm able to refer people to different support groups if they're interested as well.
Yeah. And I was going to like interject right here. The reason I think that the Start Asking Fertility coaching that you're doing, and it's so important because I will say my clients are so susceptible to being taken advantage of, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're so desperate for that parenting journey and to be a mom, right? To be a dad, that there's no expense that they would spare. If you said, go to 75 chiropractic visits, go to 120 acupuncture visits, buy this tea, buy this device, buy this tracking thing, right? That
Right.
you could spend $50,000 before you could even blink because you're willing to try anything and everything. But what
Right.
I'm hearing from you is that through the coaching program, you're really protecting them from being susceptible to all of these things that may not be evidence based, and that
Hmm.
you can gear them towards smaller, more manageable, task oriented things they can do this week rather than do all of the things. Like I literally had a client one time who like flew to South America to get this like Mayan womb massage. Like
Oh, wow.
so cool, very neat, But not everyone can do all of these things. So I think
Right.
sticking with something like coaching where you're giving holistic and evidence-based support so it's just not so overwhelming.
Yeah.
You don't feel taken
Because there's
advantage
so
of.
much out there. Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's so much out there. There's so many anecdotes. There's so many, we'll just do this. We'll just relax. We'll go on a vacation. I mean, it's endless. Eat McDonald's French fries. It's hard to sort through it all.
Yes.
And it's very hard to sort through it all. So that is my practice, is to always be evidence-based and pull in other resources when needed. Okay, so week 7 is focused on creating a support system and partner involvement. So the focus this week is building a strong emotional support network. Also talking about communication strategies. Some of our activities are discussing how to approach and communicate fertility concerns with partners. Some of the homework is encouraging open conversations with partners and establishing a support system. So, in this week, we really discuss practical strategies. For instance, when I was going through infertility, one thing that worked for me and my husband was I asked him at some point to start texting me when there was a pregnancy announcement, because he would come home in the beginning. By beginning, I mean like the first 4 years, and he would say, "Oh, someone's pregnant." And I'm immediately like feeling that pit in my stomach of, well, who is it? And is it a friend? Is it family? How many kids do they already have? And just knowing that while I was happy for that person, it was going to wreck me emotionally, being so sad for what I didn't have, and having that sinking feeling of, why can't it be this easy for me? And so what we decided is that he would send the text. It wouldn't be during work hours. It would be sometime in the evening. And then it was something that I could process on my own in private. Because a lot of times he just wouldn't know how to comfort me or what to say in the moment. And it would just end up being like a really bad night. So that worked for us. And, I help clients figure out and talk through what might work for them with their families or partners as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, and establishing boundaries maybe with friends and family to say, like, we've been on a long journey. I am beyond happy for you. I can be both and joyful for your news and sad for me. And so the boundary would be like, if you become pregnant, maybe don't spring it on me.
Hmm. Yeah. And I ended up doing that with friends too, actually, because I had a couple friends who took me to lunch because they thought, oh, that would be the kind thing to do, tell her privately, not in a group, which I certainly appreciated. But I felt like I was on stage at that point. Like I'm trying to hold in my emotions, but I have to be overjoyed and visibly happy for this friend who I am happy for, but I was managing too many emotions. And
Yeah.
you feel almost put on the spot because now you're like trapped in this lunch for the next 2 hours. So
I was going to say in
yeah,
public too, in
right. You're in
public.
public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I like about week 7 that you're saying is the like vulnerability and the transparency. Because when we started this conversation, you were saying that this infertility journey of yours was private for a long time, and
Hmm.
that there weren't a lot of women that were speaking up, especially Black women that were speaking up, and that maybe a lot of these conversations were happening right in front of you and people didn't know how badly it was impacting you, but how much better it can be when we are open and we are talking and our friends and family do know about our journey, right? And that they can tread a little bit lighter or carefully with
Yes.
us.
Yeah, it was freeing to me when I finally came out with it in 2018. And because it was like this cathartic moment where you've been keeping so much inside. Once you let it out, you're right, people can be more sensitive to it and more thoughtful about it. And you can be more thoughtful about how you want to approach people and letting them know what you need. That's a big part of these 8 weeks as well, is letting others know what you need in order to feel supported. Sometimes we have to take that on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I remembering your story correctly that you had a miscarriage and then had to go to be part of Mrs. North Carolina?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So the last miscarriage I had was a month, about a month and about 6 weeks before Mrs. North Carolina. And I had already signed up and done all the paperwork and was preparing. And I considered dropping out because I didn't feel emotionally well enough to compete. But at some point, I remember sitting there and saying, I am so tired of letting infertility like rob me of life experiences. I'm so sick of this, and it's not going to stop me this time. And so I hired a pageant coach and I really stepped on it and started preparing, just like pouring everything into that, which actually was a really nice distraction. But yeah, I was still bleeding on stage in a white gown the night I won. For some reason, after that DNC or DNE, I kept bleeding for weeks. And sometimes that happens. You may bleed for 2 months. I mean, it just depends. But yeah, I decided that I couldn't let it continue stopping me.
Yeah. I'm so
Mhm.
proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you
That
didn't
means a
stop
lot.
there. I mean, girl, you won Mrs. North Carolina. You started this huge platform. You went on to do this TEDx, on and on. And and now you own a company coaching so that you can help other people. I mean, I think that's just like the ultimate calling of if you look back and think, why? Why, God? Why did
Mhm.
this happen to me? Right?
Mhm.
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe people aren't spiritual or religious or, whatever the universe has in store for you, whatever
Mhm.
you believe. But I think it's important to look back and say, well, maybe this happened so that other people's experiences could be better or
Yes.
life changing, right? And
Yes.
not that it makes 5 miscarriages worth it, right?
Right.
Like nothing's ever going to take that away. But I just think I'm so proud of you for turning something so hard into a roadmap for other people so that it
Thank
might not be as hard.
Thank you. I really felt compelled and called to do it. I had prayed so much about, why is this happening to me, God? Why are you doing this to me? And things just started to reveal themselves. And so after I won that pageant, I'm like, well, that has to be my platform. Like, I have to use this painful, heart wrenching experience for something good, for someone else. And yeah, I just decided to take that, my greatest pain, and it turned into my biggest purpose.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, I don't love that for you, but I love that sentence of
Thank you.
perspective. So,
Yeah.
well, I'd love to hear about week 8.
Yes. So week 8 is wrapping things up. So week 8 is about long-term fertility wellness. So we talk about long-term strategies for maintaining fertility health. Some of the topics are lifestyle changes, long-term wellness practices, the importance of self-care and continuous emotional healing. I also do an assessment at the end as far as, did the client feel like they got out of this coaching what they wanted, because in the beginning we set goals together. I might have forgotten to mention that. Did we meet the goals? Because also so much of this is about what each client individually needs to feel like they're thriving. And I know that's different for everyone as far as, what are your true pain points? What do you wish you could change about your fertility journey to this point? Really, what is it that you need? And then I meet the client where they are and provide my expertise, resources that may be outside of Start Asking Fertility as well. So this is really about, making sure that the client maintains momentum, that they've gotten what they want out of it. If they want to continue, I have additional weeks that, we can continue as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's very different than like cognitive behavioral therapy, where therapists can go a long way to help you, but they're not experts in fertility and in that relationship also with your reproductive endocrinologist. So I heard a lot of things today that I'm really impressed with, especially like from a fertility coaching perspective. I didn't understand like helping someone identify their triggers and like developing coping strategies and building resilience and helping them prepare for their appointments and understanding the ins and outs of, what's going on with even what these terms are and what they mean. I know you shared with me that your mantra is to empathize and then to educate and then to empower. And I really can see that through that 8-week journey that you just took us on. It's pretty powerful. Okay.
Thank you.
Nichelle, I told you that I was going to go back to as a doula, like how now, okay. So like, let's say we're on this fertility journey and they've hired you and they've gone through fertility coaching and then they're pregnant. And then somewhere in there, they hire a doula like me. Hey, here I'm with you guys to go on this journey.
Yes.
I go on this beautiful journey with my fertility clients. And then I feel like I lose them all at the end. And I am so frustrated because I fail to understand the emotional component of how to break them free. So for some reason, the OBGYN or midwife rarely, and I mean rarely, shares with them that they will be highly recommended to be induced at 39 weeks simply for the fact that they did IVF if this fertility journey ends in IVF. And, maybe I'm not as well versed on all of the science that I could be, but everyone hires me and they want to have XYZ birth, right? Maybe it's get me to my epidural as fast as possible. Maybe it's I want to have a spontaneous labor that's unmedicated. Maybe I just want to have spontaneous labor. And then all of a sudden they're sort of surprised. But the recommendation for all IVF clients is a 39-week induction. And I don't think fertility clients know that. So
Right.
I was just wondering if that's something that do you go on to talk to them about what pregnancy looks like as a fertility client when you graduate from, your fertility clinic, going to maternal fetal medicine. There are extra appointments. And then what labor and delivery look like as a fertility client, because I've found that if my clients do not advocate against a 39-week induction, well, they're getting a 39-week induction.
Right.
Again, they're so susceptible, right? When someone
Yes.
says the stillborn rate doubles from 39 weeks to 40 weeks. Oh, it doubles again from 40 to 41 weeks. Oh, it doubles again from 41 weeks to 42 weeks. You are like, sign me up.
Yes.
Give me a C-section. Give
Yes.
me, as soon as this baby is good, give me that C-section. I raise my hand, or, schedule that induction. And,
Hmm.
so anyway, all that to be said, I never know how to doula someone through being they've come so far, and then they get to it and they kind of say, you know what? I'm going to give up the type of birth that I want because I just want to come home with a baby.
That is, yeah, I know. And that is so, because the problem is you've given up so much. I mean, you've given up, think about it. When you go in for an IVF transfer, an embryo transfer, usually you're going in with a partner. Well, some of us are going in with a partner, I'll say. So how do you surprise your partner now that you're pregnant? You can't surprise them. They know, like they've already, they know that in 2 weeks you're going to have a blood test, and they say not to test before. Now, I did, not recommending that, but they say not to do that. In which case, when you get the call, that's been robbed of you.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're robbed, at least for me, I was robbed of the whole, like, just the blind faith of, once I got the call that I was pregnant and saw it on the stick, believing that that was going to continue from week to week. I wasn't one of those women who was immediately looking for, the nursery stuff or trying to figure out what color to paint the walls. I couldn't be in that bliss. It was more of being on edge all the time. So I think because the disease itself robs you of so much, you're right. When people get to the end, they just want something to go right, and if my doctor is saying I have to do this, then I have to do this. I'm not even going to chance it. And so that is a challenge for you. And interesting that those guidelines changed, because when I had both my children, that those weren't the guidelines, or at least not where I went. So like with Hudson, I was 41 weeks when I delivered him. And then with Sienna, I was 39 weeks and 5 days. Now that was
Oh
different
my
because that was
gosh. An IVF client going to 41 weeks takes a lot of advocacy.
my doctor told me to come in at 40 weeks and 5 days to be induced. He said, if the baby isn't here by 40 weeks and 5 days, then come in. And then it took another 2 days. But I did, and I ended up with C-sections both times. But that was more, well, we talked about it in the first episode, but it was for a different reason. I never dilated it. So anyway, it wasn't necessarily expected. But yeah, with the guidelines change, well, and also if you're over a certain age,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Is that the
Definitely
new guideline? Yeah.
definitely over 40. They really don't want you to go past 39 weeks. And that's a placental health thing. Over 35, it's still a recommendation. Like, I'm going to say this, all maternal fetal medicine, which you go through if you're on a fertility journey, you're going to maternal fetal
Mhm.
medicine.
Right.
But all maternal fetal medicine, if they had it their way, everyone would get induced at 39 weeks. And there's a lot of different clinical trials and evidence behind that. Unfortunately, what a 39-week induction doesn't take into account, right, is maternal experience. So it only looks at outcomes.
Mhm.
But someone who's been on a long fertility
Right.
journey, I've found they tend to be more focused on outcomes than maternal experience at that point. Like, they've kind of given
Yes.
up. And as a doula, I really try to look for that balance. Like, I'd love for you to balance evidence with the fact that your experience of labor and delivery, it also matters. Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and you can
And have you been able to convince certain clients to push back on that and advocate for themselves?
yeah, and sometimes it looks what you wouldn't imagine, right? Sometimes a 39-week induction recommendation turns into a very empowering decision to just have a scheduled C-section because they don't want to go through this oh my gosh, and what if I don't dilate? And what if I
Right.
have a failed induction? And what if I end up, and so a scheduled C-section can be something super empowering. And then I have
Yes.
others that are like, I just know that at this point, I'm going to go into spontaneous labor and have this unmedicated birth. And then they do it too,
Yeah.
So back to the individualized care that you were talking about in your Start Asking Fertility coaching company, it is very, birth is individualized. So,
Yes. It's almost, I told somebody once, it's like fingerprints. Everyone's is so different because everyone wants to know, well, how did your birth go? Because they're trying to see how theirs might go. I'm like, listen, mine will have absolutely nothing to do with how yours goes.
hmm
Yeah,
and
it's
even from number one to number two, if someone's blessed to get pregnant again, I'm always also, you can't compare the two, right? Like one, you might go into spontaneous labor at 37 weeks, and the next one, you might be induced at 41 weeks. And they could be,
exactly.
one might be a vaginal birth and one might be a cesarean birth. No two journeys are the same. And
No, because I thought with Sienna, I was going to walk right into the OR feeling good, no labor pains, because I had a scheduled C section.
mhm.
And the night before at our last like dinner, my husband and I started having labor. Like I went into labor, I started having contractions. And I'm like, whoa, what is this? Ended up calling the hospital. They said, come on in. And I had to walk to the OR, having contractions, having to stop every few seconds, like, or every few minutes, thinking, this was not supposed to happen. I was supposed to come in with a fresh face of makeup, hair done, like, okay, I'm ready. No, that is not at all what happened. So, to your point,
Yes.
even when you think because I have a scheduled C-section, yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
hmm And you bring so much experience to this conversation. And I truly think that the power of your company and specifically working with you goes back to that empathize, educate, and empower. I mean, I just can't think of a better person to be walking any individual or couples through a fertility journey. So, Nichelle, I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you being here today. And I learned a lot about fertility and fertility coaching.
I'm
So,
so glad. Thank you. Yeah,
yeah.
thank you for having me. Thank you for sharing this and sharing my story.
And everything will be linked in the show notes. But just a reminder that you guys, Nichelle has a very easy website and a very consistent platform. So startaskingfertility.com and then Start Asking Fertility on all social media platforms. And I wish you the most success with your company. And I hope that you touch and impact and change many, many lives, even those listening on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. And you continue to do your positive work impacting the lives you've impacted so many so far. So keep it up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan, and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like.